Welcome to the Ecolure Bass Fishing Soft Bait Lure Making Kit. When you're ready to push your fishing to the next level, because using someone else's fishing lure is like using someone else's fish. So here's the lowdown of what's in this kit. It's basically everything you need to get started to make your own soft bait senko-like eco-friendly lures. The kit includes the cups, stir sticks, the mold release, and the eco-friendly biodegradable rubber. Here's 100 grams of the green colored rubber, and we also have a 100 gram bag of the natural colored, so 200 grams total for lots of lures. Depending on the size of the lures, you can get anywhere from 10 to 40 lures in the kit. Instructions explain how to make these cool lures that will help you catch that big fish. And we have some starter shapes. These shapes will get you going, and when you're ready, you can make any other shape that you want. Plus, a top for the mold release. And here's the natural colored eco-friendly rubber. This looks super cool in the water. And here's the reusable ImPRESSive Putty mix to make your shapes. Plus, we have a fish scent to help attract the fish. Other than what's in the kit, you'll need a microwave or anything else to heat the materials. A microwave is the easiest and fastest. And you'll also need a microwave-safe dish. And probably some scissors or a knife. To start, we need to prep the ImPRESSive Putty mix. Pour this onto a microwave-safe dish, and we will microwave this for 30 seconds. The ImPRESSive Putty is a reusable molding putty that allows you to make lots of molds with the same mold maker material by reforming it whenever you want to. You can just remelt it and reform it anytime you want. So, we need to make the putty into a soft, smooth texture. This requires us to heat the putty for 30 seconds and then stir it for 30 seconds. We do this 2 times. And the caution here is the putty will be very hot, so don't touch it with your skin. Use a spoon or a stir stick to mix it. After you have mixed it 2 times, let it cool for about 10 to 15 minutes until you can handle it in your hands. Knead this putty for 2 minutes until it is super smooth and there's no bumps or other texture in the actual putty. You're now ready to use this putty. Anytime you want to use this ImPRESSive Putty again, you just put it back in the microwave for 30 seconds and it will get soft again. You can reform this as many times as you want just by softening it in the microwave again. It's a super cool material. And just to give you other ideas of how you can use this ImPRESSive Putty, the ImPRESSive Putty works really well with the biodegradable rubber that's in this kit, but you can also use other casting materials as well. We have a soft bait rubber that works great. It's a silicone base. Plus it works well with epoxies, soaps, and waxes. So it's a really versatile mold making material. And as this putty cools, we can now prepare the fishing lure shapes. The kit includes 10 mix and match shapes to help make different senko-like worm lures. These shapes have little notches that can help hold the shapes together, but first you need to snip them apart. Use clips or scissors to separate them. Now with these shapes, you can make worm lures ranging from a couple inches to up to 9 inches long by putting the different shapes together. You'll see some of the pieces are end pieces while others are portions of the worm. So experiment with different sizes. We've also added the fatter heads to allow a nice place to put the hooks when you're using a Texas style rig. And to keep in mind, these are just starter shapes. When you're ready, you can go experiment with any other fishing lure shape that you want. You can use other lures and mold those. You can use shapes that you carve out of wood, out of plastic, pretty much whatever you want. And you can experiment as many times as you want because the biodegradable rubber can be remelted and reused as well. Plus, the ImPRESSive Putty can be remelted and reformed to make any other mold shape that you want. So it's a great way of learning and it's a great way of making awesome lures. You can make around 20 different combinations of lures with this kit, ranging from a couple inches up to 9 inches long. You can give them fat heads or skinny heads, and every shape depends on what you think is going to catch that fish. So it's all up to you. And every time you want, you can just reform the ImPRESSive Putty over these shapes to make a new mold. We've done it with a few combinations here, and we'll choose one of the shapes and we'll use that to actually show how to make a mold. So now the ImPRESSive Putty is cool enough that we can touch it with our hands. We're going to soften that back up again, and we're going to get rid of any of the texture that's in it. We're going to make it nice and smooth, and I want to elongate it. Here I'm setting up a example shape that we will mold with the ImPRESSive Putty. When the putty is still warm, but not too hot to touch, you can elongate it to the length of the lure shapes and press it over these shapes. I could also hot glue these shapes together so they stay together better, but I didn't want to for this little guy. Now, press the ImPRESSive Putty over the shapes. Be sure to press along the edges. I like making the mold on a clear piece of plastic so I can see the bottom and see where I need to press a little bit more. But you don't need to do this. Try not to use a paper plate as what you're putting the mold on, because sometimes the putty can stick to the uncoated paper when it is still warm and soft. Place this mold into the freezer for about 10 minutes to cool. You'll know it's solidified when you press it with your fingers and you don't leave an indentation. In the meantime, you can also get the EcolureMaker biodegradable rubber ready to go. The amount of the biodegradable rubber you use will depend on the size of your lures or how many that you are making at the same time. So I'm going to fill the cup about halfway full, and I'm going to microwave this for about 15 to 20 seconds. You want it really hot, so heat it and then mix it really well using one of the stir sticks. While that is heating, I pull the lure shapes out of the mold. These shapes can be reused to make different molds and different shapes. If at any point you don't like the shape of your mold, you can always reform it just by reheating and reforming the ImPRESSive Putty. It looks like a little bit of putty got in between a couple of the lure shapes, so I use my finger to pull out those little bumps out of the mold. These little pieces of putty can be reused, so don't throw those scrap pieces out. Don't know how many times I've forgotten the mold release. Don't forget the mold release. If you don't use the mold release, the rubber has a tendency to be a little harder to get out of the mold. This is vegetable oil mold release. It takes a drop or two. So put on the dropper top onto the mold release bottle and add a drop or 2 or 3 into the mold. Use your finger to spread the oil around. Be sure to get it around the mold as well as inside the mold cavities so that the rubber doesn't stick. Now back to the EcoLure biodegradable rubber. It's hot because we just took it out of the microwave. And while it is hot, we want to mix this up really well. The mixture has a fiber in it to give it more strength. This is also the time to add in your secret ingredients. This could be other scents, it could be breadcrumbs, it could be pieces of meat or cornmeal, whatever you think the fish are going to love. After mixed, make sure the temperature of the rubber isn't too hot to touch and spread it into the ImPRESSive Putty mold cavity. Experiment with different techniques for spreading into the mold cavity. You can get really fast at this. I like to start by filling up most of it and then coming back and spreading the rubber more carefully. After it is cooled, I can even use my finger to clean up the edges a bit. When you get good at this, you can place the mold in the freezer to cool, pull out the lure, and put more rubber in it while the rubber is still softened that didn't go into the freezer the first time. After you clean up the edges, place the mold and the biodegradable rubber in the freezer for about 5 minutes to solidify. It's ready when you can pull out the lure without it stretching. And to remove the soft bait lure from the mold, I like to push my thumb underneath and slide it along the mold surface so I don't put tons of pressure on the lure. And as long as you use mold release, it will come out really easy. This will take a little practice, but if you break a lure, it's not that big of a deal. Just remelt and reform the lure. Clean up the edges with scissors or a knife or your fingers. All those scrap pieces you cut off, those can be reused. Plus, the biodegradable rubber that was used in the water can be mixed with new rubber to make new lures. As a lure, this biodegradable rubber lasts about 30 minutes to an hour in the water before it starts to lose its strength and will likely break apart after this time. Since it acts as a fish food and it's 100% biodegradable, it won't leave a mess. It decomposes in the same way as a leaf or a piece of wood, so it will take some time before it disappears completely if it's left in nature. So after you made one lure, you can make a lot more. Here we're adding some fish scent. You can use any fish scent you like. The scent in the kit has worked really well for us, so that's why we share it with you. You can also mix other materials into the biodegradable rubber. This can be different colorants or different materials. And when you're ready, you can also make different shapes not included in this kit. So just experiment and have fun. I recommend making lots of the same lures so you have backups before changing to a different shape, but you can always go back to make a previous shape. This kit is a great gift for creative people who love to fish. It puts you in control of the fish and lets you enjoy the catching of the big fish without leaving non-biodegradable plastic rubber in the bottom of the water. The biodegradable rubbers that are in this kit can be mixed together or they can be used separately. Both the natural colored and green colored EcolureMaker biodegradable rubber can be colored. You can use food coloring or other pigments and dyes. The food coloring will wash away after a little while, so put in a little bit more than you think. So that's the process. At any time, you can remelt and reuse the biodegradable rubber and the ImPRESSive Putty to make different shapes. Everything is really up to you. You can create great lures that no one else in the world has. And when you catch that big bass fish, you can smile knowing that you have the secret lure. And you could tell people, but then they'd have to pay you. And the last step, of course, is to go fish, have fun, and let us know what questions you have. Go fish.